A man who was famous for many things, not the least is building a better mouse. Harold has been being outdoor for 35 years. I'm dating the beginning of that path, of course, from 1928 and the release of Steamboat Willie, the picture that introduced sound to the cartoon and Mickey Mouse to the world. Was it actually the first cartoon in which Mickey appeared?
Yes, in which Mickey appeared, yes. But I was making cartoons long before that. In fact, I think I've been in this business about as long as anybody living today. I started actually in the to make my first animated cartoons in 1920. Of course, they were very crude things then, and I used old sort of little puppet things. We didn't draw them like we do today. I used to make little cutout things, and joints were pinned, and we'd put them under the camera, and we'd maneuver them and make them do things. And
this was before you came to Hollywood, actually.
Oh, yes, this started back in Kansas City, Missouri, where I was working in who made the little advertisements for theater. It's equivalent to what you see in TV commercials today, you know? Put your winter coat in early, you know? Get your fedora block in the winter and all those kind of things. This was back in the days when they had the old canvas tops on cars. Get your top renewed.
And I got to do necessary.
Yeah. There's one little thing I did there is you had to think of little gags, little catch things, you know. So I had this spanking, shining car drive in. I had a character on the street. He hailed the driver and he says, "Hi, old top, new car." And the guy in the car says, "No, old car, new top." Then we go into the pitch of where to get them renewed and all that stuff.
Well, I was dating Steamboat Willie simply because it was Mickey's first appearance and also the first introduction of sound to the cartoon. Now, in the case of Steamboat Willie, I suppose some picture came first and sometimes sound came first, or was it always picture first?
Oh, in the days of Steamboat Willie, it was picture first. Now, we used to put the sound on afterwards, and in those days you couldn't do what we call dubbing today, where you could mix a lot of tracks. It wasn't yet the science that you could get away with, so we used to have to do everything at one time. And we used to have to run the cartoon. We'd have the fellows with the sound effects. We had the people with the voices. We had the orchestra going, and everybody had to synchronize. We put that thing right on the button. And we had a way of doing it, though. We had a little kind of a little beat that worked up and down, and there was so many of those beats, you know, and they were all musicians working for me, so they could follow those beats. And when it came to a certain number of beats, they would go pop, or they would go bang, or they would go this, or they would pop one of these pop guns, you know, and it would always fit.
It was kind of opening night for everybody.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was on that house. It really was.
Well, after Steamboat Willie, of course, came the Silly Symphony. So many of them so happily remembered, and not quite 10 years after Steamboat Willie, we saw Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, first feature-length cartoon.
Yes, just about 10 years.
How long was it in production?
I actually started to plan the picture about 1935, and I fooled around with it, trying to get a hold of a story and things for a couple of years, and finally it began to gel. Then I went to work on it. I finished it the fall of 1938. And I didn't know what I had or what would happen or anything. We had the family fortune. We had everything wrapped up in Snow White. In fact, the banker, I think, was losing more sleep than I was. And fortunately, we put it in, premiered it, and everything else. Why, everything was fine. The banker was happy.
And the following spring along came that Academy Award.
Oh, yeah, it wasn't but about 2 years later that I was almost broke.
Well, 2 years later, it's following Pinocchio and coming into the Fantasia period.
Yeah, that about did it, you know.
Right. But that was a
big success, financial favorite.
Certainly an artistic success.
Well, there's some people would question that too.
And I recall a new and musical Mickey, fairly impressive as a conductor.
Well, that's what started. I was doing this Sorcerer's Apprentice with Mickey Mouse, and I happened to have dinner one night with Stokowski. And Stokowski said, "Oh, I would love to conduct that for you," you know. Well, that led to not only doing this one little short subject, but it got us involved, where I did all of Fantasia, and before I knew it, I ended up spending $400,000 getting music with Stokowski.
Well,
But we were in that. It was a point of no return. We would have made it.
they were certainly worth it every foot of the way.
Well, he's a great guy, though. I don't want to belittle Stokowski, but he is a great musician, a great artist.
Well, perfectionism always costs money, I guess, and that's certainly something you've all been after.
Well, I was always known as a perfectionist until I met Stokowski.
And you had a new member of the club, indeed. Well, about a year after the release of Fantasia, Robert Benchley, I remember, joined you in explaining to audiences all over the world how you go about making a cartoon. What are the principal technical advances since that time?
Well, better drawing. The first thing I did when I got a little money to experiment, I put all my artists back in school. The art schools that existed then didn't quite have enough for what we needed, so we set up our own art school.
Well, you were inventing a new art anyway.
Well, yes, but we were just going a little bit beyond what they were getting in the art school, where they work with the static figure. Now, we were dealing in motions, movement, the flow of movement, the flow of things, action, reaction, all of that. So we had to set up our own school. And out of that school have come the artists that now make up my staff here, and more than that, the artists that make up most all of the cartoon outfits in Hollywood, were directly or indirectly out of my school.
Well, of course, everything is people, and it was the individual and collective talents of these artists. I was only asking if there had been a technical advance in that your own work in the cartoon field seems to have acquired so much more depth and so much more.
Yes, there are many technical advances, but basically the thing that gives us more depth is our ability to draw the way it should be drawn for this medium. We got a lot of depth out of the way you shape a line, the way you draw the figures. That contributes an awful lot to the depth and to the overall effect that you see today with the cartoon.
Now, in the early 1940s, we saw Saludos Amigos and a little later the Three Caballeros, the latter being the first combination of live action and cartoons. Tell us a little about how those two pictures came into being.
Oh, so which one, the Saludos Amigos?
I presume kind of led you to the Three Caballeros.
Well, that was, I was asked by the government to go to South America, and kind of a cultural thing, before the those Nazi days. Yeah. And I went down with the staff to see if I couldn't make some films about the ABC countries down there, like Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. And they first wanted me to go on a handshaking goodwill tour, and I said, I don't go for it. I'm not a good handshaker and everything. And then they came back and said, will you go down and make some films about these countries? I said, well, that's my business. I can do that.
Take a pencil in your hand.
That's right. So I took the staff, and we set up headquarters in Rio. We also went and set up a studio in the Argentine. We went over to Chile, and some of my artists, we divided a party. Some of them went up to Peru. And when we came back, I made these 4 short subjects. We brought back the Tico Tico tune was being played down there, and I brought that back and put it in. Brought back Brazil, and both of them became standard tunes here. And out of it, we developed this little Brazilian parrot, Jose Carioca, who played with Donald Duck. Anyways, these 4 films were more or less put together, and they went out in the theater. And of course, it was one of those things that they thought Disney needed a subsidy, but fortunately, that little thing went out, and it did a heck of a business, and the United States government didn't have to put up 1 nickel.
Oh, wonderful.
It was actually a goodwill tour for the government.
And it was later, about 2 years later, that the Three Caballeros then became a new...
There was a follow-up, yeah.
Combining live action.
Yeah. I only need the subsidy on that one.
Well, I gather that Mary Poppins, currently in production, is the further development of the combination of live action and cartoon.
Yes, you might say that. We have a sequence in Mary Poppins that's where we have the live characters in with the animated drawings. But basically, Mary Poppins is a live musical fantasy.
Uh-huh.
The whole story is carried out by live actors. And of course, we have a lot of tricks the trade here that we incorporated into Mary Poppins, such as they fly around and all of that kind of stuff, you know, but still, it's basically a live-action musical fantasy. Well, after the wonderful cast, by the way.
Well, let's change the subject for a few minutes, Walt, from film activities to outside activities. Perhaps I should say outdoor activities. I'd like to talk to you about Disneyland. Where did you originally get the first notion of Disneyland?
Well, it came about when my daughters were very young, and Saturday was always for Daddy's Day with the two daughters. So we'd start out and try to go someplace with, you know, different things, and I would take them to the merry-go-round, and I took them different places, and as I'd sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, did all these things, sit on a bench, you know, eating peanuts, I felt that there should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where the parents and the children could have fun together. So that's how Disneyland started. Well, it took many years. It was a whole period of maybe 15 years developing. Started with many ideas, threw them away, started all over again. Eventually it evolved into what you see today as Disney. But it all started from a daddy with two daughters wondering where he could take them, where he could have a little fun with them too.
Well, now that Disneyland is flourishing as a place of dreams coming true, who goes to Disneyland? What is the ratio of adults to children as part of father and daughters?
Four adults to one child. That is, we're counting those teenagers as adults, of course. But, of course, in the wintertime, you can go out there during the week and you won't see any children. You'll see all the oldsters out there riding all these rides and having fun and everything. At summertime, of course, the average would drop down. But over a year-round average, it's 4 adults to one child.
And, of course, in my knowledge, there have only been one adult who's been refused permission to the park.
Well, we didn't refuse them permission. Well, we were all set. You see, we work according to what the State Department wants to do. But they come in, they have guests. If Khrushchev was a guest of the government. So, I mean, we were ready to receive Khrushchev. But it so happened that the security problem here in Los Angeles, because actually Disneyland is in another county, you see, and the chief of police, we can't blame him. He had quite a chore there to carry out. He just was a little worried about somebody maybe walking in Disneyland with a shopping bag and what they might have in it. You'd never put them know, you know.
Exactly.
But we were ready for him. The press was ready. Both the State Department security and the Soviet security had come and cased Disneyland, and they were all set. And I was all ready. And in fact, we've had a lot of dignitaries down there. And he was one that Mrs. Disney wanted to go down and meet with Khrushchev. Oh, she was disappointed he didn't come.
Well, it's certainly not ever an empty place, so I can understand the security man's concern.
We had different shops, places where we take pictures with Khrushchev, and I had one of my favorite, where I lined up in front of my 8 submarines. You see, and I thought, well, it'd be nice. I've been pointing to Mr. Khrushchev, saying, well, Mr. Khrushchev, here's my Disneyland submarine fleet. It's the 8th largest submarine fleet in the world.
Is it really? Well, we're going to be seeing part of the tour that the submarine make presently, so it's interesting to hear about. What was the initial cost of the Disneyland that first saw the light of day?
Oh, it goes back so by different cost estimates. One time it was $3.5 million, and then I kept fooling around with it. We got up to $7.5 million, and I kept fooling around a little more, and pretty soon it was $12.5 million. And I think when we opened Disneyland, it was $17 million.
And then it grew like topsy.
Today it is going on $45 million.
My gosh. Well, now today, the newest and most exciting aspect of Disneyland is what I've turned this over on my tongue several times, what you call audio-animatronics.
Yes, audio-animatronics figures. It's a sort of another door that's opened for us. See, our whole 40-some-odd years here has been in the world of making things move, inanimate things move. from a drawing to all kinds of any little props and things. Now we're making these human figures, dimensional human figures move, make animals move, make anything move through the use of electronics. It's a tape mechanism that the tape, it's like a programming or sequencing when they do a missile, when they're sending some missile to the moon, say. At different stages, at different times, things must happen. That's all programmed, predetermined. So our show is put on that tape, and it's programmed from this tape. And we run it off a little 1-inch tape that has 14 tracks. And on each track, we can get up to 16 signals. Now, the little signals go and impulse this figure and make the figure move, make the figure talk, and everything. Well, I could show it to you a lot better than I can tell you about it. We come over here, and I'll give you a little preview, I should say. Well, here we are, Fletcher. Little audio-animatronic setup for the parlor kit, so to speak. Now, these are not working from tape. These are manually controlled. This little gizmo here, kind of like a joystick on the old type airplanes, is what gives us a chance to program the birds. And as we work this and get all the little movements that we want in the bird out, we record it on the tape. And from then on, the tape will do everything that we've done here. Sit down, we'll have a little go at this thing. Now, this is not part of our Disneyland show. I mean, you know, the Tiki Room. This is a little robin that we had in Mary Poppins. And this little bird sang a duet with Julie Andrews. Maybe we can get a little response from it. Hello there, kid. What can you do for us, huh? Can you sing, whistle, anything? Oh? Oh. Pretty good. Now, this is one of the characters from the Tiki Room. He's actually a substitute. In other words, if one of our master ceremonies, we have 4 macaws who act as master ceremonies in the Tiki Bird Room of Disneyland. And they actually keep the show rolling. And along with them are other birds who sing and things, and flowers that sing. And the Tiki images, you know, the carved Tiki poles and things with Tiki gods, they sing and they drum, and we have quite a show. But this is the boy that takes care of it. In other words, he's the stand-in for one of them, you know.
He's very alert.
Throw out your chest, show him how big. That's it. Now, this is Fletcher Markle of CBC.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name.
Markle.
How do you spell that, sir?
M-A-R-K-L-E.
M-A-R-K Markle.
That's right.
How do you do, sir?
How do you do? Whatever your name is.
What is my name?
Well, I'll tell you the truth, we haven't given the name yet. How would you like Jose?
Muchas gracias. This gives me an accent.
How do you do, Jose? Now it's official.
How do you do? Oh, miss my accent.
Well, that's just a little demonstration of audio-animatronic figures.
Now let me make sure I understand what happens in controlling these birds by these extraordinary instruments. You can at the same time record their movements on a tape.
That's right, after we get it programmed. It's like rehearsing a show. And you go through it and rehearse it, and you finally say, that's it. We say, all right, let's go for a take. As we go for a take, all the things we do here are recorded, and then when we play the tape back, he will do everything he's doing here. Only it's all part of a programmed show, you see.
And I understand then that the next step beyond the birds has been to do the same kind of programming with human beings.
Yes, with human beings, yeah. I'm not going to replace the human being. But just for show purposes, because you take Disneyland down there, we operate 15 hours a day. And these shows have got to go on the hour. Now, the Tiki Bird Show goes on 3 times an hour. And I don't have to stop for coffee breaks and all that kind of stuff, you see? So that's the whole idea. It's just another dimension in the animation that we've been doing all our life. It's how we're going into dimensional things and everything. It's a new door. It's a new toy for us. And we're having a lot of fun. And we hope we can really do some exciting things in the future.
May I try one here?
Right ahead. How about a song then? What about you, Jose? Got anything to say?
Hasta la vista.
That's right. Hasta la vista. Let's go over and finish our teas.
Well, let's change the subject again, if we may. I'd like to ask you now about your accomplishments as an international film producer, and that you've made films in how many countries in the world?
Oh, I can't recall because we've done a lot of our nature films, and we have a series called People and Places where we went over Japan and different places, even over into the Egyptian area. But I have been basically making films in, well, England first with our British company, and then in Canada. I mean, as you know.
Well, our telescope viewers are naturally interested in your plans for Canada. They remember well, of course, Nicky, the Wild Dog of the North, which I think was your first Canadian production.
Yes, we did that between Calgary and Banff, and we worked with the Canadian Wire Right for what would you call it? Canadian Wire Right for
Society, I guess.
Is it society? Oh, it's the government. It's the government. Anyways, they let us have an experimental station that they had was abandoned or weren't using, and we put our company there, and they went right through the winter, and we got some wonderful stuff on the film.
And then with the second film, you went to eastern parts to make Big Red.
Mm-hmm.
So the locations of Big Red. Coming up in the next few days, Canadians are going to be seeing your third Canadian production, The Incredible Journey.
That's Sheila Burnford's best-selling story of it. One of my favorites. I think the animals in that are terrific. I hate to say that to you, Fletcher, because you directed the humans. I'm always partial to animal actors anyway, you know.
Well, I found the animals pretty pleasant too, I must say. But it's certainly the animal picture, and one of the most remarkable animal stories of its kind that I've ever read, let alone had anything to do with as a film. I gather, Walt, that you first found out about the story even before it was published in North America. During its English publication.
Yes, it was first published in England, and we had that's where we caught on to it.
You had your plans long before it became a bestseller.
Yes, we got into quite a hassle though on who some bidding went on to get that story, and when it all ended up, and I found out it was my good friend George Seaton was bidding against me. George apologized. He said, "I'm sorry I run the price up on you, Walt, but I didn't know you were bidding against me."
These are things you can never know about in a fact. Actually, the part of the Canadian story that interests me more than any other is the fact that your father was born in Canada and lived a good part of his life there before he moved to parts to the south and began producing sons.
Yes, he was born in a little town, I think they called it Bluevale. It's right out of Goderich. And the Disney family were Anglo-Irish, and they migrated over there in the 1830s, which makes me feel that the Disneys had foresight, because it was 1840 when they had the Potato Family remark. But they were smart enough to get out before that. And my father was born there, and he was raised there, and went to school there. In fact, he went to school in Goderich. And he was about 20 years old when my grandfather went to Kansas, out in the same area where General Eisenhower, ex-President Eisenhower, came from. And he was an alien, of course, being a Canadian, and he had to buy his land. He couldn't homestead. And he bought a section of railroad land, and that property stayed with the Disney family until just a few years ago, my uncle had it, and I had told him, I said, before you sell it, let us know. And for fun, he wanted to sell it and retire. And I went to my brother and said, let's buy this virgin land that our ancestors, acquired. And he said, what do we want with farming land there? He wouldn't go with me. So I didn't go ahead, but I found out later they struck gas and oil on it.
Well, you can't win them all.
No.
Tell me, Walt, have you been back to your father's homestead at all, refugee?
My father and I had planned to go back because as a boy, my father always told me about his boyhood in Canada. And you see here, 4th of July is a big deal here, but my father always referred to the Queen's birthday, and that was Victoria. And that's when they had their big doings, And I always wanted to go up there with my father because the youngster, you know, he told me about all these different things that he did and in the country. He thought it was the most beautiful country in the world, and yet he'd come down here to live. And he died before we had a chance to do that.
Well, after your father's death, did you finally get a chance to get back up to the old homestead?
Yes, I finally made it. I took Mrs. Disney along. She's not too interested in ancestors and things, you know. But when we got up there, she really fell in love with the town of Gottlich, the beautiful little town. And she was quite happy about it. But I wanted to find my the homestead where my grandfather, you know, went out and cut the tree down and pulled the rocks apart, and where my father was born. So they gave me directions, and everybody was trying to be helpful and everything. And Mrs. Disney reluctantly went along, and I found this old place, and so this is if they're really deserted. There were cows running through the house and chickens around, and I had my camera, and I got out, and I photographed that thing from every angle. And when I got through, I found out I'd photographed the wrong homestead. Well, ever since Mrs. Disney never forgot. She tells that to everybody about when Walt went up to Canada, and he photographed the wrong homestead, you know.
Well, let's leave that in the past where it properly belonged, and look ahead for a moment to the future world. What's on your immediate schedule? I gather there are some projects for the World's Fair in New York.
Yes, they're more or less an extension of Disneyland in a way. We're doing 4 shows for the World's Fair.
4?
Yes, it's about $50 million worth of shows that we're doing for the World's Fair. Of course, that includes the cost of the building, the rent of the land, and everything. We're doing one for the Ford Motor Company. We're doing one for General Electric. We're doing one for the Pepsi-Cola Company and the state of Illinois.
These are, when you say extensions of Disneyland, are any of them audio-animatronic?
Yes, audio-animatronic and the dimensional type of shows like we do at Disneyland, not film shows. No film involved in any of these shows. We use our audio-animatronic figures. And at the State of Illinois exhibit, we're going to have great moments with Mr. Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln is going to be there. He's going to speak 5 times an hour. It's going to be very lifelike and very, very believable. And we've finding some wonderful words of Mr. Lincoln that are still prophetic today. And I think it's going to be a great moment for the public when they can sit and hear Mr. Lincoln talk about some of the things, what is liberty, you know, the rights and the obligations that we have and all of that. I think it's needed today, too.
I should say, too. Well, Walt, it's very difficult to talk about reward because certainly you've had so many of them, 29 Oscars and nearly 700 other awards from all corners of the world. But personally, what has been your greatest reward to date?
Well, my greatest reward, I think, is that I've been able to build this wonderful organization, been able to enjoy good health, and the way I feel today, I feel like I can still go on being a part of this thing after 40-some-odd years in the business, and also to have the public appreciate and accept what I've done all these years. That is a great reward.
I'm sure it is. It seems unlikely, but if you had it to do over again, would you do any part of it differently?
Well, if I had it to do over again, I think, no, I don't think I would. I don't know. I hope I don't have to do it over again.
There's certainly a completely unique reward in having that feeling about your work and what you've accomplished. Yes, you're right. That's a reward of satisfaction and happiness. Sure. Yes. What does happiness mean to you?
Well, of course, I mean, happiness is a state of mind. I mean, that you can, if it's your own doing, you can be happy, you can be unhappy, and just according to the way you look at things, you know. So I think happiness is, well, contentment, but it doesn't mean you have to have wealth, you know. But all individuals are different, so others wouldn't be satisfied with just carrying out a routine job and being happy. Yeah, I envy those people. I had a brother who I really envied because he was a mailman. But he had all the fun. He had himself a trailer, and he used to go off and go fishing, and he didn't worry about payrolls and stories and picture grosses or anything. And he was the happy one. I always said he's the smart Disney.
Actually,